Good morning. Please go to Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5. My topic for today is love. I don't know if you noticed that in the songs. If you want a teaching topic that really matches the music, just pick love, because we have so many songs about that. I'm not sure once we get to the fruit of the Spirit, patience, if we'll have such a wide range of songs to pick from. But anyhow, love is difficult to define. And I did a little survey on Facebook about love just to see what people thought about it. Got some interesting answers. Some people said love is caring for others. Others said it was intentional, proactive thought based on sympathy. It's a very technical definition. I like that one. Another person said love is sharing your guacamole. And then she defended herself by saying, look, I'm from Texas. This is a real thing. Other people said love is patient, love is difficult, love is able to comfort the hopeless, love is felt, not described. Of course, that is a description. Love is never ending, love is kind, love is dumb, one person said. Love is sacrificial, love is thoughtless, love is unconditional, love is endless hugs and support. Love is valuing something you don't care about simply because your spouse does. I get the picture of a wife sitting there watching a sports game that she doesn't care about. I don't know if that's what she had in mind, but that would be love. Love is selfless. Love is amazing. Love is disc golf. Love is forgiving that person in the lift chair that shoved you out. Hopefully that wasn't from a high point. Anyhow, and then last of all, love is wanting and acting for someone's ultimate good and well-being in the same way God does for us. So those are some thoughts that people have on love, and that's just a number of people that responded. But love is a hard thing to define. We're going to come back to love in a second, but I want to begin by looking at Galatians 5:22 with you, because that is where the fruit of the Spirit begin. Okay. So Galatians 5:22, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So there are 9 here listed as the fruit of the Spirit. People puzzle over exactly why these were mentioned and other things weren't mentioned. I don't know. But these are the 9 that we're going to be focusing on and working our way through. These are what I believe to be normal Christian behaviors. I don't think that these are exceptional, that Pat Barrett here, she's in the love category, and Timmy Paul is in the joy category, and Dan Wohl over here, he's got patience. I don't think it's like that. I think these are for all of us. And are you mad that I said patience? Did you want a different one? I'm not trying to cause controversy, just using an example here. So I don't think it's like that. I think it's the sort of thing that we're all supposed to have, these different aspects of godliness in our lives. And I tell you what, you'll get a lot more out of this series of teachings if you look at verses 22 and 23 and think about your neighbor. No, don't think about your neighbor. Think about yourself, right? Don't think about how the person next to you could really work on self-control. What is that? What is that going to do? Think about yourself and think about where in these areas can you improve? Because look, all of us, no matter how long you've been a Christian, no matter how long you've been taking your faith seriously, we have room to improve in these different categories. And maybe God's calling you to take a step forward today. Maybe God's calling you during this time of looking at these to get serious about some area where you have a weakness. I won't tell you where mine is, but those of you who know me can probably figure it out. It starts with a P and it ends with Asians. But, that's not our topic for today. That's not our topic for today. God's Spirit is living inside of us, and because of that, we have these fruit in our lives. And if we don't have these fruit in our lives, there's some sort of a blockage that is that you need to deal with, that we all need to deal with, to cultivate that fruit. Let's back up a little bit to verse 16, Galatians 5, verse 16. I want to contextualize this verse we just read about the fruit of the Spirit. Verse 16 says, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh." Did you catch that? Walk by the Spirit, you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. It tells us two things. One, the flesh, and I'm not just talking about the meat between your skin and your bone. I know that was gross. Your flesh, it has desires, right? It's not just your physical flesh. There is a spiritual flesh, or I don't know what you want to call it, a soulish flesh. There's some part of you, some component of you that has bad desires. You ever notice that? Some people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. God bless you. You're just so special. When I look within my heart, I see, if I could look at my heart as a garden, I see some really nice things in there, and I see some weeds. I've got flowers and I've got weeds. I've got some different things going on. And I was talking to my wife, or no, it was Priscilla, and she's starting to see some of these weeds emerging in her own little children. That one of them lied, and she said, "I never taught him how to do that. I never taught him how to lie." And we see this with our children, right? That they just kind of have these fleshly desires, and they pop up. But what verse 16 is telling us is that there's a way out. There's a way out of this programmed rebelliousness that we have. The way out, it says, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh." So that's our way out. It's interesting, it doesn't say, kill off the fleshly desires. It's interesting, it doesn't say, develop a 40-day habit, and through that, you will conquer this behavior you don't want to have in your life. Now look, that might help. Okay, I'm not against anything that might help. But what I am saying is that its focus is on walking by the Spirit, not on rooting out the weeds. It's feed the flowers, water them, make them stronger. Verse 17, "For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and," guess what? "The desires of the Spirit are against the flesh, for these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things you want to do." So you get it, we've got two opposites. We've got the Spirit, we've got the flesh. The flesh has these desires that are innate within us. Yours maybe are a little different than mine, but we all have rebelliousness sown in our hearts, just like as a default factory setting, right? The human condition is such. But then there's also the Spirit, and the Spirit has desires as well, which is really cool. Have you ever had conflicting desires about something before? Yeah, I've had Was there somebody that said yes and no at the same time? Yes, no. Boy. Yeah, a few days ago, I was at the Starbucks in Latham, and I ordered my drink, and I was standing there, and I just felt this pressure, So I went to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom, and I don't want to be crass, but, I was going number one. I'll just put it that way. And suddenly, somebody knocked on the door. Now, this is a big deal. You're in a public bathroom. You don't want people knocking at the door. And so what did I do? What do you think I did? They are either way at Starbucks. There's no. It's a single person bathroom, so it doesn't matter. But that's a good guess. That's a good guess. I was not technically in the ladies' room. I was just in the bathroom, general bathroom. So anyhow, I hear this knock, and what do I do? Well, I know that I locked the door. I know that I know what I'm doing. I know that I've done this 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. Maybe not at that Starbucks, but just in general. I've used the bathroom in a public space and locked the door probably 1,000 times. So but just out of courtesy, I shout. I'm in here, or I don't remember what I said, but I said it very loud, because you got to get through the door. I'm facing, just to give you a somewhat of a understanding here, I'm facing this way, and the door's behind me. Thank God, right? And so I was like, I'm in here! And then wouldn't you know, the next thing that happened, that door opened. That door opened. And so now in that moment, I had a conflict of desires. Because on the one hand, I wanted to turn around and see who the intruder was. And on the other hand, I was doing something over here. So I had a conflict of desires. I don't know which was the flesh and which was the spirit in that case. But thankfully, whoever it was, they blurted something out and then closed the door and ran away. I never saw him again after that. But, sometimes we have conflicts of desires. Look at verse 18. What I'm saying is choose the spirit. And don't forget to lock the door. I can't believe I did. I think I pushed it, but it didn't, that little button, it didn't go in all the way, or who knows. Man, I can never go to that one again. Thankfully, there's 75 other ones within a quarter mile. Just kidding. All right, verse 18. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. And I don't want to get too deep into the theology behind this, because Galatians is an epistle. It's 6 chapters long. We jumped in at chapter 5. We parachuted in the middle of a situation, and we just looked at one little verse there, and now we're trying to get the context. But just to spell this out a little bit, the problem with the law is not really with the law, it's with us. Because when the law comes, and when we encounter God's law, what happens within us? A desire. You read about this in Romans 7, a desire to rebel. As soon as we see the law, we say, I don't have to do that. Who authorized you to tell me I had to do that? Right? Who are you to tell me what to do? Well, I think I have another idea. I'm the exception to the rule. We have these innate rebellious desires within us. And so that's one of the problems that we have with following the law. Verse 18, but if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. So God's Spirit saves us from the trap. I mean, the law is not a bad thing, whatever law we're talking about, if it's God's law, right? But the problem is our own flesh. But the Spirit gives us a way out so that we're not under the law. And then verse 19 says, now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So this is the setup here we have about the fruit of the Spirit, is that on the one hand, you have the flesh, which is these innate desires that are within our bodies, within our minds, that are kind of pushing us against what God says is right, okay? And then those are called the works of the flesh. Isn't that interesting? It's not called the fruit of the flesh. And then on the other side, you've got the fruit of the Spirit. And, work, I get the impression when I hear the word work of like sweat on my brow and, you're working and it's taking all this effort. Fruit, have you ever walked by an orange tree or an apple tree and heard just like these grunting noises like, ugh? Fruit just naturally pops out, right? I mean, it just naturally grows. There's no like, ugh, and then like a little grape appears on a vine, right? No, that would be weird. So, fruit is sort of just natural. If things are the way that they're supposed to be, God just makes stuff grow, right? He programmed it to do that, and it just does it faithfully. Verse 19 again. But these works of the flesh, these are bad. These are bad. You shouldn't do these things. Neither should I. Some of these are not too much of a temptation. I don't know. When's the last time you were tempted with sorcery? Hasn't really come up much in my life. But then there are other things that you're just like, or orgies. I don't know if any of you are really struggling with that today, and Christ can set you free, brother or sister. But these other things, what about anger, though? Jealousy, dissension, like fighting with people, causing division. Some of these things are really very, very to the heart of our situation today. And so what this is saying to us in verse 19, it lists out these works of the flesh. Verse 22, you get the fruit of the Spirit, right? What we're seeing here is that if you want to slay the dragon of strife, you need kindness. Think about that. Strife is like a dragon. It's a monster. It's nasty. It tears things apart, right? But if you want to slay that dragon, you don't go up and you say, "Oh, I'm not gonna have strife in my life. I'm not gonna have strife. I'm not gonna have strife. Whatever I do, I'm not gonna fight. Next time I see Frank, I'm not gonna fight with him. I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna let him get under my skin. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna go there. It doesn't matter what he says about me. I'm not gonna fight with him." Good luck. Good luck. Good luck with that strategy. Now, if I say instead, I'm going to be kind to Frank. As soon as I see him, I'm going to be kind to him. It slays the dragon, right? You don't have to worry about strife if you're actually kind. Or if you want to defeat anger, you need gentleness. Or if you want to conquer divisiveness, you need faithfulness. Or if you want to overcome sexual sin, you need genuine godly love in your life. If you fall prey to drunkenness, you need self-control. So these fruit of the Spirit, they're not nice art for your wall. They are nice art for your wall. It's a very convenient little list, and it's helpful to memorize. But that's not all they are. These are powerful, ladies and gentlemen. These are powerful. God has given this to us to help us to be His people, to live above this age, to live like we're going to be in the kingdom. That's the way it is going to be then. We can live that now as a testimony to that. But today we're focusing on love. So let's back up a little more to verse 13. The question I want to ask is, well, what is love? Isn't that a song? What is love? Okay. Baby, don't hurt. Okay, verse 13 there. Sorry, it was like an 80s flashback up here. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. So you see in verse 13 and verse 14, it talked about love. It talked about how through love we are to serve one another, and that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. So love is such a big deal. Love is not temporary. Biblically, from a scriptural point of view, love is not temporary. It's not just the sort of thing that you have sometimes is permanent. It's everything else is relative, right? But love is absolute. Everything else is negotiable, but love reigns supreme. Love is this one thing that Jesus singled out in Mark chapter 12. Jesus singled this out. The scribe asked him the question, "What's the most important of all, Jesus?" And Jesus answered, "The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall" what? Yeah, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I mean, look at all these alls. This is about as big of a statement as you can possibly make, right? What's the most important thing? The most important thing is love, but then it's not just partial love. It's all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. I missed one. All your strength, right? Can you say it a bigger way? Can you think of a bigger way to say the same thing? I mean, this is as big of a way as there is to say it. And Jesus didn't come up with this. This was the heart of the Old Testament. This is the heart of the law of God that the people of Israel had known for centuries before Christ. And so they asked Jesus, "Oh, what's the most important?" He answers just like anybody else would answer. He says, first of all, it's that God is one and that you are to love Him with everything. And look, if you're worshiping multiple gods, you can't love with everything, can you? But if you have one that is supreme, then you can love that one above all else, right? That makes sense. Then Jesus adds, the second is this, you shall love that knucklehead neighbor as yourself. Didn't say that, did it? No, it just said neighbor. All right, so that's good neighbors, knucklehead neighbors, annoying neighbors, neighbors that don't clear their leaves, neighbors at your work that work near you and just are so annoying, neighbors in your family. Would that count as a neighbor? Somebody you live with, roommates, right? He doesn't say what kind of neighbor. He just says love your neighbor as yourself. And when Jesus is called to task on this verse, When somebody questions him about what it means, he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, you and I, when we think about the Good Samaritan, right, you have this Israelite who's on his journey from Jericho, and he's going down this steep hill. It's a really treacherous place. He gets mugged. He gets stripped of his clothes and his possessions, and he's left on the side of the road, half dead, right? That's just a random guy. Jesus doesn't even give a name, because that's the whole point. He's just a random guy. Doesn't say he's good, doesn't say he's bad, right? And then a Samaritan comes along, and the Samaritan helps the guy. Did the Samaritan know that guy? There's no indication that the Samaritan knew that guy. So when they ask Jesus, who is your neighbor, Jesus picks the most opposite kind of people, right? People that normally would hate each other. Samaritans hated the Jews. The Jews hated the Samaritans. They were absolute enemies. They would call each other terrorists. They would call each other bad religious names, right? Heretic, and you say, oh, that Samaritan cult. You know, they had all kinds of words to make fun of each other. I mean, these people normally hated each other, and they don't know, these two particular ones don't even know each other. And Jesus says, that's the one who's your neighbor. I mean, that's really saying anyone. Anyone. It's not just the person that lives next to you, but you know what? What about that person? What about that person that lives next to you? Do you even know their name? We get so isolated in our culture, right? It's like we don't even know our neighbors. You know, I've had some, and I'm not talking about just exactly next to you, but you know, in your close proximity. We've had some people move in. We try to say hi to them and stuff, and they don't want to be friends. They don't want to hang out. They don't want to say hi. And you show up with a little plate of cookies or something, and they look at you like you're some sort of a criminal that's trying to scope out their goods or something. You know, it's like, dude, I just saw you moved in. No big deal. But you know what? Just because they're hard and they're isolated, just love them anyhow. You know what I mean? Show kindness to them anyhow. And but it's bigger than just our physical neighbors, is my point here. And Jesus continues, there is no other commandment greater than these. So, I mean, this really is the big one. If you want to check how you're doing spiritually, this is the first question to ask yourself. Am I loving? Am I showing love? Am I expressing love to God first? That's obviously the most important. And then also to my neighbor. And if you're not, you gotta deal with that. You know what I mean? You got to ask God, God, help me to love you better. Isn't that a weird thing to ask? He's okay with that. He's okay with you it's like a father that gives his child money to buy him a present on Father's Day, right? God's okay with that. He will give you what you need to love him, right? He's okay with that. And he wants you to love him. And it's not because he's an egomaniac. It's because he made you to be loved by him and to love him back. That's how he made you. And so if you're not doing that, then you're not fulfilling, you're not being who you were made to be. And when you are doing that, there's a sense of, I'm home. It's okay. Even if stuff is going wrong, my center is good, right? I love God and he loves me. And then loving your neighbor as yourself, that can be hard. The poem in 1 Corinthians 13, we're not going to go there. I just pull a few things out of it. You can read it on your own if you like this week, though. 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love never ends. It says, prophecy will pass away, tongues will cease, miraculous insight or word of knowledge will stop, but love is forever. Isn't that something? So you don't really see this a lot where in the Bible, somebody will take these different things and say, well, this one's better than that one, and it's better than that one too. And the other one is better than the other one too. And it says it's better than faith, it's better than hope. The greatest of these is love. We do get this with love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that love is exalted to us and lifted up as the thing without which we're nothing. It actually says that. It says even if you're speaking in tongues, even if you're moving mountains, even if you're giving everything you have to serve the poor, if you don't have love, you're nothing. Actually, it says you're noisy and annoying. It's like a clanging cymbal. That's what it says, right? So love is really big, and I know it's in a list of 9, and it doesn't really go into describing, love is the biggest. No, it's just listing them out. But it does put love first. Galatians 5:22 does put love first. And there are so many different definitions for the word love. Let's look at verse 13 again. For you were called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. That's a pretty good definition to work with. Through love, serve one another. What is the kind of love we're seeing in Galatians 5:22? It's the kind of love that serves one another. And then in the next verse as well, for the whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's this tendency in our culture, and you see it in TV, I don't know if it's other places too, probably, that looks at love as if love is seeking someone else's happiness without judging them. It seems like that is a working definition that I encounter, at least in TV shows. Okay, so I was watching this one show, and there's this guy, and a lady comes to him, an ex-girlfriend. She's now getting married. She's engaged. And she says, I want to have one last fling before I get married. And this guy, he's wrestling with it because she's with another guy. If he is with her, then, that's her, she's not married, but it's cheating. You know what I mean? And he's wrestling, and he doesn't know what to do. So he asks his coworker. He's like, what do you think I should do? I really want to do this, but at the same time, I think it's wrong, and I feel this inner turmoil over it. And the coworker said, oh, look, I wouldn't judge you. Oh, I wouldn't judge you. You think it would make you happy? Would it make you happy? Then do it. What? I just think that's such a weak definition of love. Because you know what? In the show, he did it, and then he felt like garbage afterwards. And he felt terrible. And then the guy who was engaged found out about it, and now he wanted to beat him up. You think there's wisdom to why God gives us these different ways to live, right? He wrote the manual. I mean, look, you can use a screwdriver as a nail or as a hammer. You can use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail, right? You can do it, but you'll mess up the screwdriver. You'll probably hit the wall a couple of times, and that nail's probably not even in as good as it would be with just one swing of the hammer, right? So we're going along in life doing these other things, but if we can love according to the way that God calls us to love, rather than just seeking everyone's happiness. Look, happiness is fine, right? But I'd rather have joy. We can look at that more next week. So how you treat other people is a big deal. The opposite of love in verse 15 is, if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. That's the opposite. So you can either love or you can bite and devour. Now, I want to talk about shallow love versus deep love. Shallow love, I think, is infatuation. And I know that that's risky to say because our culture is obsessed with that. It thinks that's the only true thing in the world, is that terrible feeling you get when you're in love with somebody in your gut, and they look at you, and then they walk away, and you're just like destroyed, right? That's what our culture thinks of as being love. But if you think of an apple, okay, I think that's just the skin of the apple. I think that's all it is. It's good. It makes the apple look nice, right? An apple with no skin, it starts to turn brown. It's kind of weird and gross. But the skin isn't really doing much for you once you start eating the apple, right? It's good, but it's not the whole picture. The deep love is that flesh of the apple, right? The part that you're actually chewing with all the juice in it, right? And that is the kind of love that we're called to. It's not just this, I remember when I was dating my wife, just like the thought that she would sit next to me in a meeting. Oh. Right? And you've got these butterflies in your stomach just because, oh, she called me. Or, oh, he called me, and or these days, he texted me. We didn't text when I was on the market, as it were. So we also didn't have emojis. So I think that's adding a lot to the game today. But we're talking about love that is much deeper than that. I think that's fine. I think God gave us that infatuation kind of love. It's probably combined with a sense of temporary blindness, just to help us to get married and to propagate the human race. That's so cynical. I'm sorry. But I think once we do that, then it's like the hard work of actually loving this person. And so when I'm looking at this word love in the Bible, I don't see it attached to emotion very often. I really don't. I see it as an action towards others. And the supreme example of this is in chapter 2, verse 20. So let's look there, because this is really in the background of everything else. And the simple fact is, if you're called to love someone over and over, day after day after day after day, and that person is in any way difficult, you're gonna struggle. You know, don't we all struggle with this? So Galatians 2:20 gives us a key insight. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. This is the chief grounding of love. This is the center of where your source for loving others comes from. It says in 1 John that we love because he first loved us. Right? And then it goes on to say, how can you say you love God if you don't love your brother? If you can't love him who you can see, how do you love him who you can't see, right? But the source we love because he first loved us. And God's love for you is infinite. Wow. God's love for you, personally you, not you as a group, but you individually, God's love for you is infinite. It has no boundary on it where it's like, all right, well, you know, Lance has used up so much love points this year. We're just gonna cut it off a little bit. We'll lower his rate of love until he gets to. But it's a new year now. Turn it back on. It's okay. All right, feel the love, brother. Is that what God is doing? No, his love is limitless. He just pours. Is lavish. It's not stingy. It's generous. It makes me think of my cell phone. There it is. Your phone your battery ever die on your phone, anybody? Sometimes that happens to me where my battery dies on my phone. I want to show you a little demonstration here. Show you a little demonstration of my life. We're really going to be vulnerable and let you in here. It's going to be epic. It's going to be real epic. All right, so let's say I'm at that Starbucks before I did the bathroom thing, and people are just like looking at me like a normal person, not like a weirdo who leaves it unlocked. I mean, who does that? And I've got my phone, and the battery is dead. I'll tell you what I do is that if I have my laptop, what I'll do is I'm working on my laptop. Jerry, you know what I'm talking about here? Oh, yeah. And, it's not a lot of room, but you get a little bit of space, a little real estate there at the coffee shop. And so what I'll do is I'll take this right here. This is my charging cord. You see that? And I'll plug the phone in to the laptop. Has anyone ever done this? Some of you have these fancy new battery, what are those called? There's like an extra battery, a portable charger. Same idea, okay? You don't need a whole laptop to do this. Let me figure out which side I'm going on. Only one of my plugs does this, by the way. The other one is not powered, so I got to get the right one. All right, we're plugged in. Oh, did you see that? It lit up, had that little circle, and then it'll on the top here, it'll have a little red light. And that's how you know it's charging. Yay. Okay, so this is me loving somebody else. Okay, it's me charging my phone from my laptop. This is me just loving somebody. And, the love, I guess if I'm the laptop, the love is going out from me and into this person. And this let's say this is one of my kids because it's smaller than the laptop. Let's say this is Ezra. He's my 2-year-old boy, right? And I'm just pouring love into him. And, I just do that minute after minute, hour after hour. I pour my love into him. But, what's happening to this laptop while it's charging the phone? What? Yeah, that battery That battery, which is right back here, see that big sucker? Hello, that's a battery, huh? I'm proud of that. That battery there is getting drained as is charging the phone. And so am I with my 2-year-old. Can anybody relate to this? I mean, the kid, he does show love a little bit, but sometimes he does stuff that is just so difficult. This morning he brought in, I don't know where he found it, he got a little plastic cup. And of course he's obsessed with water. I don't know why, but like anything to do with water or sink, whatever. So he goes and he fills it up and he brings it into the bedroom. He has no idea of boundaries. We tell him 1,000 times, go in the kitchen if you have food. Go in the kitchen if you want to have a drink, right? But no, I'm in there trying to get this tie on, and he's got this plastic cup, and he's got it resting on the bed. And then next to it, he's got one of these cereal bars, the ones that are specifically designed to crumble as much as possible. And it's sitting next to it. And he's over there, and he's eating and crumbling, and then he pours it all over himself. And then he's mad at the water. And so he's trying to give me the cup, and I'm like, I can't take the cup, and I don't want you to spill. You know, that's real life, right? This is how we are with our relationships. Obviously, that's a kid, but like, you maybe have people in your life that act like 2-year-olds sometimes, right? And you're just charging them and you're loving them and be like, I'm a Christian, I'm going to show love, you know, and that little red thing is on and that power is going out. But here's the problem. Eventually, your battery dies. Will you just put that in the kitchen? Your love tank goes empty. And this other thing happens, right? And there's that person next to you at work, and they're just always chatting on the phone, or they're doing some other thing that's annoying, and you're like, oh, I'm going to love them today. I'm going to love them today. I'm going to love them today. Will you get off the phone? This is a place of business, right? And that's what happens to us. But now, what can God do? What can God do for us? Aha! Aha! How much love does God have? Huh? How much love does God have? His love is what? Infinite, right? Let me tell you something. Once I got this sucker plugged in, I think there's electricity in here, right? Oh yeah, look at that. Having a good day. Oh, you see how it just lit up? The laptop just lit up. It's just like, oh, I have infinite power now. That's what the laptop just said. If you're tapped into God, right? If you're tapped into God, you don't have a limit on your love. Look, it's still doing the same thing. It's still charging the stupid phone, right? But now it's not losing anything either because it is being replenished by God's love. And let me tell you, that is a key for you to love in the long haul, to love day after day, difficult people. I mean, easy people, you just love them because what else are you going to do, right? I'm not even going to talk about easy people. Jesus says, oh, you think you're so special because you say hi to people that say hi to you. The pagans do that, right? He says, you know, if you greet somebody that greets you, guess what credit you get? It's just like nothing. You're like, everybody does that. I'm talking about loving the people that are hard to love, the people that are in our lives and that don't always respond the way we want them to respond, and that sometimes misunderstand the love and everything else. If we are not actively going to God and having Him replenish, if we're not plugging into Him to replenish our love tank, then eventually our love tank is going to run dry, and then we have limits, people. We have limits. He doesn't, but we do. So we have to plug into Him. Does that make sense? One more time. 1 John 4, verse 19 says, we love because He first loved us. We love because He first loved us. Think of the charger with the laptop here. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a what? Tell us what you really think. All right. He is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from Him, whoever loves God must also love his brother or sister, right? that this is the commandment we have from God. If you want to, you cannot say, God and I are good, but Kurt back there, man, I hate his guts. He's always talking German and soccer, and I just hate his guts. You know, it's just something about him. He knows I don't hate him, so I can say that. But no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. I'm not saying you're going to be best friends with everybody, but you have to show them love, right? I'm not talking about emotion here. The emotion, if you have the emotion too, great. You won the lottery. But if you don't have the emotion, you still have to show that person love. Otherwise, your relationship with God is in question. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. Now, one more thing I want to mention about Galatians in general, just by way of closing here. Galatians is the Apostle Paul's strongest and harshest epistle. Of all the different epistles, he calls them names. He's really in their face in this epistle. This is not a have a wonderful life and everything is great epistle. This is you guys are off track and I'm trying to set you straight kind of epistle. Throughout the time that he spent in Galatia, the Apostle Paul, he was persecuted. He was beaten up. He was rejected by his own people. He leaves, these churches are formed. He started these churches, but he left. And then other people came in with a new teaching or a different teaching than what he had given them. And part of that teaching was that they had to keep the law of Moses. And so what Paul's doing in this epistle is he's saying to them, you don't need to keep the law of Moses. What you need is the gospel message, right, through Jesus Christ, what he has done for you. And then you live by these fruit of the Spirit, and you won't carry out the deeds of the flesh. That's what he's doing here. But this is not a warm and fuzzy epistle. If you read all of Galatians in its entirety, it's a little shocking. It's a little shocking. I'll admit that. It is. Here's my question. Is Paul being loving? Or is he a chief hypocrite? Is he a chief hypocrite, the kind of person that's mean and harsh and then says, you guys got to love? That's a hypocrite. No, I don't think he's a chief hypocrite. I think sometimes love is calling people on their stuff. Sometimes love is saying to somebody, hey, you're doing it wrong. Right? Sometimes that's love, okay? Now, if you're just going to be harsh and is not motivated by a genuine concern for that person, don't call it love. That's just you being a jerk, right? But if you're calling somebody out, if you're confronting somebody, as Paul is throughout this epistle, if you're doing it because you genuinely care about that person and you really want to help that person, then that is love. And I know it's not going to make that person happy if you say, hey, you need to repent. Nobody likes the sound of those words, even if you put hey in front of it like I just did, right? You still don't like the sound of those words. But if it's in line with what God says, and if it's motivated by a concern for that person, then it is love. And we need to be able to receive love like that and give love like that, in addition to the kindness and the gentleness and everything else that we've been talking about here. So there was actually a moment in Galatians 2 where Paul talks about an incident where he confronted Peter to his face. Peter stopped eating with the Gentiles when these other guys came from James. You remember that? Some of you who've read this remember that, right? And Paul says, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. I bet that wasn't comfortable. I bet afterwards, if you interviewed Peter, it'd be like, Peter, tell us how you felt right after Paul confronted you. He wouldn't be like, oh, I was happy and felt not judged, right? But it was true love because Peter had been drawn away into hypocrisy, pretending like he wasn't going to eat with Gentiles so long as these Jewish brothers were here. But then when they left, he'd be like, hey guys, pass the bacon, right? I mean, that's not right. So Paul confronted him on it, and it was true love. Look at Jesus. He's the supreme example of love. I'll just close with this. When Jesus is dying on that cross, do you think it's an emotional butterfly, oh, I'm so in love, feeling on it while he's going through that torture? But was he loving? You see what I'm saying? Love does. right? I want to end with the words of Bridget Benedict, who, yeah, I know. Yeah, she worked for us for how long was that? Years. Did a great job. What's that? Not long enough, right? And some guys swooped her up and moved her to Tennessee, and it's just so sad. We don't want to talk about it. Anyhow, this is what she wrote about love. She said, when I think of love, I picture Jesus on the cross. God, our Father, proved his love for us while we were dead in our sins. He sent his Son to be the propitiation for us. And then she cites 3. This is just a Facebook comment for the record, right? 3 scriptures. So that we could be forgiven and be with him. His perfect, beloved Son, the only man who has ever been completely faithful to him, God gave for us. That's love. And I think of Jesus saying, greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. Jesus loved the Father and proved it by his obedience. Jesus loved us and proved it to be giving his life for us. Love is obedience and sacrifice. When I think of love, I think of chesed. That's a Hebrew word. It means covenant love or commitment. Love is a determination that I am committed to you. I will be faithful to you. It is loyalty. It is I am for you. I love that one. I want good for you. It is you can trust me that I won't betray you because I love you. I think in our Western world, we tend to focus on feelings and affection a lot when we talk about love. And I think those things are an important part of the love, but love is also truth. Love rejoices in the truth. It doesn't always feel good. It disciplines, it rebukes, and corrects because it wants the good of others above not wanting to hurt feelings. It is evidenced by all the things described in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is merciful and forgiving. It is gentle and kind. It is seeking the good for another above yourself. That's pretty much right there. That's a good definition, right? Seeking the good for another above yourself with a pure heart. It does not dishonor another or scoff at or belittle another, but values others as worthy because they are made in the image of God and Jesus died for them too. Love is being fully devoted to God and to each other. Just some of my thoughts on love. Thanks, Bridget. Let's pray. Father, we ask that you would be with us and guide us during this time of considering these fruit of the Spirit. I pray in particular today for the subject of love and the importance of this, that you have placed it in Deuteronomy right in the heart of the Old Testament as the core creed of your people. And that your Son has told us that this is the most important. We ask that you would help us to love, especially when the time is difficult, and that you would help us to draw strength from you, to connect to you, to charge on your love, so that we can be able to love one another. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.